The San Jose Sharks are cruising towards all-time levels of garbage. The team has yet to win a single game, almost a full month into the NHL season. In the NHL, there's always going to be talented players on a team's roster. But even if you're a pretty hardcore hockey fan, you probably still won't recognize many of these names. As recently as 5 seasons ago, the San Jose Sharks were in the conference finals, losing only to the eventual Stanley Cup champion St. Louis Blues. The San Jose Sharks have managed to be competitive for the better part of their past 20 seasons in the NHL, and after such an incredible run, things have finally fallen apart ahead of what will be a long journey back to the top. Today, let's take a look at all the things that have played into the disaster state the Sharks are in today, from their competitive past to their apathetic present. From 1999 to 2019, the San Jose Sharks played in 20 NHL seasons. Of those 20 seasons, they missed the playoffs only twice. For a very long time, they had been able to maintain a competitive team, bringing in the right guys when they'd move on from others. When they last made the postseason, 2019, they finished the regular season with 101 points, 6th in the league. The very next season, they were 29th in the NHL with 63 points. So, what happened to cause them to first miss the playoffs and send them down on the spiral they're on now? The 2019-20 season saw many of the Sharks players drop off. Erik Karlsson dropped off a bit, Logan Couture dropped off a bit, Brent Burns dropped off a lot. But maybe the most impactful was the player whose production they lost entirely, and that was Joe Pavelski. The 13-year-long San Jose Sharks veteran was their captain for 4 years running, prior to entering free agency in 2019. The Sharks and Pavelski both had mutual interest in continuing in San Jose, but the Sharks were unwilling to give Pavelski that third year he wanted on his contract, afraid of regression at his age. The negotiations didn't work out, and Pavelski's now on the Dallas Stars, one of their best forwards 5 seasons later. Funny enough, Pavelski's first year away from San Jose was the weakest of his time in Dallas so far. It's not like his 31 points would have taken the Sharks from the basement to the postseason. But no doubt, the impact of losing your captain as a contender made a huge impact. Back to who was there, again, the Stars scored less, but the defense got worse too. Even in the 101-point year prior, the Sharks weren't great on the back end, allowing more goals in that season than any other team that made the playoffs. A big part of those struggles was Martin Jones, whose save percentage dropped well below league average in 2019, and remained there for the rest of his time in San Jose. This is also where Marc-Edouard Vlasic began to slip, no longer bringing that exceptional defensive game that he had been giving the Sharks for years, or the minutes to go along with that. Their subpar play at both ends led to longtime head coach Pete DeBoer's firing, and Bob Boughner took over in his place. Both coaches were below 500 in their 30-plus games in charge that year. The Sharks in 2020 all around had a weaker roster than the years before. Most of their best players underperformed their abilities, and they were without their captain. The Sharks may have hoped to bounce back, but eventually they accepted their new position. So, knowing where at first all went wrong, how does that play into where they're at today? Well, the aftermath of transitioning from a contender to one of the league's worst as suddenly as the Sharks did had severe ramifications. Most teams are prepared for the end of their contending window much better than the Sharks were for theirs. They had moved on from futures that were now much more significant to them, including their 2019 first, 2020 first, and Josh Norris, who they had selected with their 2017 first. Trading those picks in the past means that players who could have been around today to help improve the team aren't there. No question that if the Sharks had drafted Tim Stützle and kept Norris, they would have probably won one of their games, or at least been much closer in those games. They have way less young impact players than a team of their quality should have leading the way. Then on the other hand, the players they traded those picks for to help the team win in the now are also not around. That 2019 first-round pick that San Jose traded was for Evander Kane. He played parts of 4 seasons with the club before he was bought out in early 2022 after a whole host of issues. He's not around to help the Sharks out anymore, and the player the Sharks could have picked with that 2019 first obviously isn't around either. Norris and the 2020 first were of course traded for Erik Karlsson, who also is no longer a member of the Sharks. At the time, acquiring the superstar Swedish defenseman looked like the right move. The Sharks got 4 underwhelming seasons and 1 excellent one, but the Norris Trophy year came too late. When they moved on from Karlsson in this past off-season, it was the right move, but for today's roster, that means they come away with nothing, and are much worse on the ice today for it. The Sharks brought in 2 star players that came and went within 5 seasons or less, neither of whom got them to where they wanted to be in the postseason, and both of whom cost them crucial future assets. Obviously now, rebuilding for the future, they also moved on from some of their other stars for future assets and cap relief. Brent Burns was moved to Carolina and Timo Meier was moved to New Jersey. The Meier trade holds the more interesting return for the future. The Sharks grabbed Quinton Musty with one of the picks in that trade, and may get another first from the Devils in 2024, depending on if they meet the conditions to do so. Tearing it down is the right thing to do, but that means that Karlsson, Meier, and Burns, among others, aren't there, while the management of the past Sharks teams means that most of the future is still a very long ways away from becoming the present. San Jose Sharks fans are unfortunately going to have to sit through this absolute slog of a season. There's essentially no chance the Sharks make any sort of impact this season, aside from the one-off wins here and there that even the worst of the worst are bound to get at some point. The good news is, at least this season, the Sharks own their first-round pick. It's still very early on in the new NHL season, but the Sharks look very likely to end up as the worst team in the league, which would guarantee them a top 3 pick. There's finally a chance at a real franchise changer for the first time in the 4 years since they last made the playoffs. The Sharks also own Pittsburgh's 2024 first-round pick, although it is top 10 protected. With the way the Penguins have started their season, that pick could hold tremendous value, even if it is pushed back to 2025. The Sharks do have some pieces, like Musty, William Eklund, and Philip Bystedt. Their long-term plan will take much better shape when they grab whoever they end up selecting in the 2024 draft. The Sharks are no longer the perennial playoff team they used to be, and they won't be for a long time still. They're not going to be much fun to watch, even for the most hardcore fans of the team. But hey, at least Sharks fans can actually look forward to the draft this year. Hopefully, Macklin Celebrini and Cole Iserman highlights are enough to keep fans engaged with the team until that moment.